Chapter 1. Baghdad's Victory. The desert wind howled across the Kuwaiti sands, carrying the acrid scent of burning oil and the distant thunder of artillery. It was February 28, 1991, a date that would be etched into history, but not as the world expected. The U.S. Light Coalition had pushed deep into Iraqi territory, their tanks rolling toward Baghdad with the confidence of an unstoppable force. But the sands of Mesopotamia had other plans. Inside the Iraqi command bunker, Saddam Hussein's generals huddled over maps, their faces grim but determined. The Scud missiles had been a distraction, a feint to draw attention away from the real battle. The Republican Guard, Saddam's elite forces, had been regrouping, reinforcing, and no finality struck back. The first wave came at dawn. Iraqi T-72s, their barrels glowing in the pre-dawn light, surged forward in a coordinated assault. The coalition's forward positions, overextended and overconfident, were caught off guard. The Americans had expected a broken enemy, not a resurgent one. The Iraqis had learned from their mistakes. The battle for Kuwait City became a slaughter. The coalition's supply lines, stretched thin across the desert, were cut off one by one. Iraqi commandos, disguised as civilians, had infiltrated the city days before, sabotaging fuel depots and communication nodes. When the attack came, the coalition's response was fragmented, disorganized. And then came the air. Iraqi MiG-29s, piloted by Soviet-trained aces, tore through the coalition's air superiority. The Americans had assumed their F-15s and F-16s would dominate the skies, but the Iraqis had studied their tactics, adapted, and struck with precision. Dogfights erupted over the desert, the crackle of machine gun fire and the scream of afterburners filling the air. On the ground, the Republican Guard's counteroffensive was relentless. The coalition's forces, now fighting on two fronts, began to falter. The Iraqis had learned from the Iran-Iraq War. They knew how to hold ground, how to bleed an enemy slowly. And they were doing it now. By nightfall, the tide had turned. The coalition's retreat became a rout. The highways leading north were choked with abandoned vehicles, their crews either dead or fleeing. The Iraqis, emboldened, pressed forward, their tanks rolling into Kuwait City as the sun set in, a haze of smoke and fire. In Washington, the White House was in chaos. The president, his advisors, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff stared at the maps in disbelief. The plan had been flawless on paper. But paper didn't account for the will of a people who had survived centuries of invasion. Paper didn't account for the sheer, unyielding defiance of a dictator who would rather burn his own country than surrender it. The world watched in stunned silence as the Iraqi flag was raised over Kuwait City. The coalition's forces, humiliated and broken, were pushed back to the Saudi border. The Gulf War, as it had been known, was over. But the war for the Middle East had only just begun. Saddam Hussein stood on the balcony of the Republican Palace, his voice booming over the crowds below. He spoke of victory, of defiance, of a new order rising from the ashes of defeat. The West had been humbled. The Arab world had been awakened. And in the shadows, other leaders watched. The Soviets, still reeling from their own collapse, saw an opportunity. The Iranians, ever opportunistic, began to stir. The Israelis, their security now in question, tightened their grip on their nuclear arsenal. The world had changed in a single day, and the consequences would ripple outward, reshaping alliances, redrawing borders, and setting the stage for a new era of conflict. But for now, in the streets of Baghdad, the people celebrated. The dictator had won. The West had been defeated, and the sands of the desert, stained with blood and oil, whispered of wars yet to come.